Hi, everybody. This next panel is going to talk a little bit about rural development, and specifically we're going to talk a lot about tools that rural landowners and rural communities have in an age of development. So we've got 4 panelists up here today. We have Brett DeBrucker. Brett is a farmer and rancher near Choteau and Dutton, right in between. Dutton is my hometown, so I roped Brett into doing this today. Then we've got Josh Spitzer from the Sun Ranch Institute, and they're doing some really interesting things with agriculture experiments. Then we've got Hank Getz here, and most of you probably know Hank, and Wendy Ninteman. Hank is with the Blackfoot Challenge, and Wendy is with the Five Valleys Land Trust. So come on up. Yeah, I know these chairs are nice. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, at times it seems that in rural communities you pretty much have, in Montana's most rural communities, you pretty much have 2 options. You either dry up as a community, which is happening in a lot of the places inside the cowboy boot, as Governor Brian Schweitzer says. The cowboy boot is basically the flathead going all the way down through Missoula, over to Bozeman, and then to Billings, sort of our urban cores. But in a lot of places inside that little ring, places are depopulating pretty quickly. So that's one option, or the other option is you give way to industry or development, which then starts to, in some cases, erode the very culture and sort of fabric of rural communities. But those aren't the only 2 options, and the 4 people up here today have lots of other options, so this is supposed to be a hopeful thing. So we're going to talk about some other ways that rural development can work, both on an agriculture from an agriculture standpoint and also from a conservation standpoint. So the first question to the panel is basically, in your work, what's the biggest challenge that you see facing rural communities or rural landowners as all this change and flux happens? Josh, you want to go first?
I tried to narrow it down to one challenge and ended up with, I think, one litany of challenges. But I would start with pursuing development in a way that preserves open space and promotes biodiversity and more robust ecosystem function. A lot of the private land that we're talking about is in exceptionally ecologically valuable areas, and we can't forget that particular goal. But along with that, we have all kinds of other goals, all kinds of other challenges associated with development and return to economic vitality, including affordable housing that is close to where people work, the incredible seasonality of the businesses that we talk about. Even the solutions that we will likely all discuss will amplify some of that seasonality. Pardon me. And then, pardon me again, the cultural differences that we see when newcomers come into older established communities, and finding ways to connect both new and old without trampling either. Thank you. Without trampling either of those 2 populations.
Hank, you've had some interesting, in the Blackfoot Valley, you've done some interesting things to overcome some challenges in keeping the community strong there, and you've been very active in doing community conservation. So can you talk a little bit about what you've done there?
I can. I hope I'm not blinding everybody here in the front row. I kind of feel like Andy Rooney or something sitting up here. My producer, though, will take good care of me, I'm sure. The Blackfoot Challenge, if I may, just a brief commercial, is a landowner-based organization that works in the Blackfoot Valley. Although we do work throughout the valley, we've concentrated primarily in the middle part of the valley. For those of you familiar, Ovando and our world headquarters at Trixie's Antler Saloon on the highway there. And we've been working, I think, on a partnership basis. The whole thrust and basis of our work in the valley that dates back to the early 70s, actually, not as the Blackfoot Challenge, but as some of the usual suspects involved in the Blackfoot Challenge, have been building the partnerships and trying to use these partnerships, if you will, to keep the traditional landowners on the land, protect some of those natural resources that are there, and getting more now into the community work, I think, Josh, that you were talking about. So our biggest challenge, well, two, I guess, I see the biggest as trying to maintain the working landscapes of the valley. And we've done a fairly good job with that through this partnership building, and Jerry alluded to the project that we've been working on since 2003, where the Blackfoot Challenge has partnered with the Nature Conservancy to purchase those 88,000 acres of Plum Creek land. We've 68,000 down and 20,000 to go here by the end of this year. The other factor that, again, Josh alluded to, that we really haven't begun to deal with, but that's the affordable housing issue for the younger people, the younger families in the valley, so they can stay there, be a vital part of the community, and be such an essential part that really makes a community. The old bald-headed guys like us and folks that are moving in like that alone do not make a community. We need that full range of folks. So I think that's an issue that we're really going to have to deal with, but have not yet, Courtney.
And Brett, speaking of working lands, being the farmer rancher on the panel, what are some challenges that you see to staying on the land? I mean, things are a little bit different in central Montana, where the development isn't so rampant. It's mostly for recreation property, lots of amenity ranches, and just market forces. So what are some of the things that you've overcome to stay on the land and keep it a working landscape?
You know, I guess the first thing I'd like to say, I appreciate many of the things Hank has said there as far as the communities and trying to keep young folks around. You know, some of the big problems that we've had to address, and it's a continual issue every day, is input costs. You know, our fertilizer costs are skyrocketing, our fuel, you know, just a lot of the same things that everyday people are dealing with as far as their fuel and that nature. From our standpoint, being a farmer and a rancher, it's much the same thing, meaning the input costs, but as well as that, the situation that we're in right now as far as drought and the lack of moisture we've been dealing with. We've been doing a lot of things as far as conservation type farming, where you don't till the land up, try to preserve as much moisture as possible. But even beyond that, as much as anything, it's this community aspect of, you know, I have 4 young girls, ages 2 to 11, and they're just wonderful young girls, and it saddens me to see our young town of Dutton, or our old town of Dutton, just dry up, because there's nobody there for those kids to go to school with. The classes just continue to get smaller. So that's something I think about. I'm not saying I have any answers to it, though.
Right. Wendy, what are the big challenges that you're seeing with some of the landowners that you've worked with over the years? What are they facing? What kinds of issues are they looking at?
Well, I think just, you know, facing the change that growth brings to our rural communities has to be the biggest challenge. And how do we help those folks maintain a way of life, you know, that you're talking about for their kids, for future generations? And so land trusts like Five Valleys work with individuals and with community groups like the Blackfoot Challenge to try and find ways that we can offer tools, more choices to landowners who are facing those really, you know, crossroads of what are they going to do, because their decisions and what they decide to do is going to make the difference in our landscape. So as I think about the challenges, I think about the need for more tools and really looking holistically, like Hank talked about the health of our communities, the connection that has to the local economies, and as far as the land trust is concerned, we really concentrate on conservation easements, which are voluntary private land agreements. And traditionally, that's been a very limited choice for folks who can't afford maybe to donate a conservation easement. The tax benefits aren't enough. And so I think for the land trust community, the challenge is going to be, and for the local governments, how can we get more choices in the hands of landowners who are looking to do the right thing? They want to protect their land, can't necessarily afford to donate a conservation easement. We want to make sure that if they can't afford to do that, their only remaining choice is to subdivide and sell. And I think that's where land trusts kind of fit in, is helping landowners and helping bring more of those tools to the table.
Now, it's interesting to hear the differences between sort of the good conservation work that's going on over here in western Montana and how that helps a community, like in the Blackfoot Valley. You know, good conservation programs really help communities. And then, you know, from losing that way of life, losing the clean air, the clean water, the good view shed, those kinds of things. But, you know, over where in central Montana, where we're seeing, we'd like a few more people, you know, a few more, right, a few more people wouldn't be so bad. And I think that, I think it'd be interesting, there's an interesting corollary here. There actually is some conservation work going on along the Rocky Mountain front near Choteau. And Brett, you're right in between Choteau and Dutton, and there's a big difference in between what's going on in those two communities. Choteau's actually growing fairly quickly because of the recreation amenities that are over there. But Dutton is drying up fairly quickly. And so I'm interested in hearing from you, Brett, about sort of some of the things that you're seeing on the west side of you and then on the east side of you, because I think it's indicative of some of the differences that we're looking at when we're talking about geography and topography on a large scale.
Well, I guess some of the differences west of me towards Choteau, towards the divide in the mountains, land prices are getting way out of control as far as for the everyday rancher to be able to compete. On the other end of that, to the east, farming land prices have escalated some, but not nearly to the range where they're just totally out of whack. But I'm not sure how else to address that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting too because I think Choteau has actually done a really good job of planning for that growth and doing some community-oriented things, and I think that dovetails nicely into what you've done, Hank. We talked a lot yesterday and today about the process of planning, but there's also a community process, and sometimes community is harder to rally in rural places. It's easy to get a coalition going in Missoula, but in Choteau or Dutton, it's a little bit harder. Or in the Blackfoot Valley, where people they're out there because they want their space, they want to be isolated. And you guys have done really amazing work. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you've done that. And I think there are some lessons there for the rest of us in how to build community consensus, basically.
Well, I think first of all, we've been at it a long time. It's not a shake and bake, throw in the microwave and bring it out a few minutes later. We've been at this since the early 70s, and it's taken a while to build trust, and particularly when you're dealing with public agencies, inherently ranchers and farmers are not good friends with the Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, for example, right? But we've sure found that the tools that you're talking about, Wendy, we need the full range. We have to have the private interest, we have to have the state interests, the federal interests, the land trusts, everyone. And to try to go it alone or turn our back on those because, philosophically or whatever, they don't work, that is not going to work, or at least we found it hasn't worked there. We do have the advantage, I think, in the central part of the valley there where we don't have too many people, so we know one another, but it's not like maybe central Montana, where it's a half-day drive to the neighbor, right? And so to get some folks together is a major operation. So I think we we have that advantage. But it's that partnership and that trust and the time it takes to develop. And then, if one more little pitch, I guess, would be incorporating the traditional landowners with the folks that are coming in and buying the land. We found in our part of the world anyway, most of those folks have a really deep respect for the longtime rancher farmer, and they respect the landscape that these folks have worked on and left for the last 100+ years. And in some respects, a lot of them are a little wannabe there also, right? So you have that ability, that integrity of the long term, but then the new folks bring in some disposable income that ranchers don't have, right? They bring in political connections, they bring in people they know, and some more sophistication. And you get those two groups of people going in the same direction, and you've got a pretty powerful coalition, I guess.
Josh, I think that's a good segue for you, right? Why don't you talk a little bit about some of the projects that you're doing and how you're working within the community, because you're not a traditional operation, you're doing lots of experimentation, and you are indeed the educated, sophisticated folks coming in and buying a fair chunk of land and doing something interesting there. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, maybe I should give the quick commercial about what we do and who we are before explaining some of the ideas that we have. And want to begin by saying, first of all, we don't have really any answers. We're pretty early in an experimentation phase. And while we might talk with great confidence about the stuff that we're doing and the ideas that we have, we're still waiting to see some of the outcomes of the work that we're pursuing. So let's start there. But we were founded on the Sun Ranch in the Madison Valley. It's a 19,000 deeded acre ranch owned by Roger Lang, who is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who bought the ranch 8 years ago from a movie star. In any case, but he has pursued a holistic approach to managing that land, and we all believe fundamentally that it's critical that we keep ranchers on the range and that we preserve the traditional uses of that land and hopefully non-extractive cash flows. But with that operation, we also have a sustainable tourism operation, and we are doing a little bit of green residential development that we view as a tool to further conservation. And so we're developing 10 plots on this 19,000 acre ranch that is funding our next round of acquisitions of new ranches, putting a conservation easement on about 95% of the acreage of this ranch and future acquisitions. And I'm with the Sun Ranch Institute, that is the science and community outreach nonprofit associated with the Sun Ranch Group. So we're developing management tools, learning from other folks' practices, developing our own our own lessons derived from the work that we're doing, and hoping to package that in ways that other folks will find useful. All that said, we have, as I said, there are a number of different engines and layers that we're hoping add up to sustainable economic and ecological enterprise. One is the holistic agriculture, but another is tourism. And I think we all have to agree that the future of a lot of these lands is in one way or another in the hands of outsiders, whether they're visitors or they are new residents. We need to bring these folks into the conversation and work with them in ways to advance those traditional, the values that we all share. In addition to those two key engines, we're also doing a little bit of ecosystem services and carbon sequestration projects that will never, save a ranch, but it certainly is a nice little added cash flow that comes along with doing good work, and that introduces all kinds of challenges, as we were suggesting. The amplifying the seasonality of the business, the increased complexity, as though a ranch isn't a complex enough operation to begin with. You add tourism and all kinds of other pieces to it, it gets even more complicated. So managing that complexity is a challenge, and then understanding how does a Silicon Valley entrepreneur walk into a traditional ranching community and say, hey, I've got some ideas for you. That's a tricky cultural question that we're grappling with.
Right. You know, the tourism thing I think is an interesting issue. I was on the plane coming back into Missoula last weekend, and I'm used to on a Saturday morning having a seat all to myself flying back into Missoula, but I forgot that it was opening day, and the plane was just packed with lots of camo and orange and Cabela's. You know, it looked like the Cabela's catalog just kind of puked into the plane. And I started thinking, I started thinking really hard about sort of what that means, new economy, what the new economy looks like. And I think that when we're talking about conservation in particular, especially in some of the hinterlands in Montana, we're talking about the Conservation Reserve Program, the Wetlands Reserve Program, and easements. Definitely they have increased the value of of that land from a tourism perspective and from a hunting and, basically hook and bullet perspective. But I'm interested in hearing from all of you about what trade-offs that has. I mean, I know that it's good, and like in Dutton, for instance, I know that the Cafe Dutton sells lots more cheese fries during hunting season, but that doesn't mean that the school enrollment has gone up any. And I'm interested in hearing from you about, how do we balance that? How do we start shifting from a traditionally ag-based economy to a service-based one in some of these places and still maintain some sort of sense of community and culture and character? Anybody want to take that?
It's happening, and I think it's going to happen. It's happened in Ovando, where the Mercantile, we have a little fly shop next to the Stray Bullet Cafe in downtown Ovando, real urban area, and the folks there have said this has replaced in some fly fishing. It looks like Hypla in heaven or whatever they make those rafts out of, across Main Street of Ovando. But that's keeping that Mercantile going, and the shuttles and the cafe and these other things. And I think it's then also a matter of working together, like you'd mentioned the drought situation, and the flows in the Blackfoot are tanking and everything else. And this whole idea of the kind of the shared sacrifice, again, the partnerships, if the ag community is being asked to diminish the use of their water, not use as much, well, then the recreational committee, I think it's behooves them to be partners in this thing and say, okay, like they have, we'll knock off fishing at 2 o'clock, or some of these things get shut down. And I think the two are very compatible. And you see that, I think, some of the ranching community moving into that as a natural. The seasonality you're talking about is a big deal. I mean, it gets kind of quiet there in the winter.
Wendy?
Well, I think the reason that has worked so well is because it's truly from the ground up. It bubbled up from the ground. And we hear about that all the time, but the Blackfoot Challenge has done it. And I think that's why the two can work, because it wasn't change that came in and suddenly the community was responding. You guys were out ahead of it. Jerry Sorensen was talking about the Swan, same kind of thing, where the folks up there decided we've got some grizzly bear corridors, we've got some conservation values here, we've got some amenities, people are coming, land prices are going up 20% a year. What are we going to do to chart our own future? And I think if you come at it from that perspective, which is really what private voluntary land conservation is all about, your odds are much better of not having these ranches becoming living museums of what used to be. Because we hear conservation development, very trendy term, and we have folks coming in our office every week who have a different idea of what that looks like. And some of them are frightening, to tell you the truth, because they talk about, they're drooling over the fact that there's going to be real cows right here that these people are going to see, and you're thinking, what's it going to be like? What's this going to look like when it hits the ground? And I think the difference there.
Or what?
Exactly. That's your job. I think the difference is those local communities where those developments are happening, like you folks working so closely with the people that live there and the local governments to shape the future of our own communities.
Brett?
One of the things I guess I would like to interject a little bit is I think everybody needs to remember that not 100% of the ranchers and farmers that are on the land have the wherewithal, ability, desire to start a guest ranch, to have a hunting facility. In my opinion, the week before hunting season, when I'm getting loaded with calls and I have all the work to do that I have to get done, it does nothing but drive me up a wall. But I can understand that there is that mutual common ground that needs to be found. But there's still in the background very much a need for just that farmer, just that rancher that needs to get food into the marketplace. And that's something we need to remember.
And are you seeing a lot in Central Montana? I know I have, but I'm interested in hearing from you that people are, where it's a little bit more desperate, where people are using either easements or CRP basically for retirement programs to basically flip their land into hunting ranches?
Well, as far as like CRP goes and that thing, let me first say, I appreciate what the goal of CRP was initially. What it's turned into, I'm not a big fan of, because it's done nothing but retire land that young farmers, such as myself, even though I'm approaching middle age now, I would guess, but don't feel it yet. I don't feel it yet. But there's a lot of younger guys, your brother, for example, other people in our community that would have loved to have come back and farmed or ranched, but due to CRP being a retirement program for many of those ranchers and allowing the government to turn that into a hunting and fishing outlet, there is some animosity there, so it's something to keep in the back of your mind.
That's interesting, and I think this gives you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing at the Sun Ranch Institute, because one of the things that I've been really interested in seeing is as recreation drives up the value of lands. I mean, my fiance and I have been looking for farmland for about 2 years. I'm from Dutton, and he's also from Central Montana. We've been searching around trying to find a chunk of land that we could farm, and it's just unbelievable. And I love looking through the listings, Cabela's Trophy Properties. I love looking through those listings and seeing how conservation easements or CRP or lots of muleys and upland bird habitat plays into the psyche of that land ownership piece of the puzzle. And but I've also seen, so there's a big discrepancy there between what you can produce on the land as a farmer or rancher and what you could get out of it from a recreation standpoint. But I think that anymore with the price of wheat rising now, and some of the interesting projects that frankly that you guys have done in the past that has kept you viable so that you're able to produce enough on your land to make it more worthwhile for you to stay on the land and keep it as a working land as opposed to selling it for a recreation property. And also some of the interesting things that you guys are doing agriculture-wise to be able to raise your profitability as not just a strictly working landscape, but diversifying. I know, Brett, you've talked about doing some wind on your place, and looking at the land as a whole portfolio of ways that you can stay on it, including conservation, including possibly some development. And so I think that's an interesting, thing to look at. So can you talk a little bit about your operation, how you've talked a little bit about this, but what specifically, like bottom line, what's gonna make this thing work? Are the other projects subsidizing the agriculture? Because that's usually what it turns out being.
Well, with respect to agriculture, we need our cattle operations to break even if we want this to be a model. for anybody else. And so they are managed as a discrete business unit that has to pay its own bills and has to sit on its own bottom. Now that said, when Roger purchased the ranch 8 years ago or so, he made a longer-term investment that not everybody would be able to make to rehabilitate a piece of property that was really beaten up and overgrazed and beginning to erode and had been infested by weeds and so on. And that investment phase would be very difficult to weather, I think, for lots of folks. They haven't figured out how to handle that for other people yet. But so the agriculture needs to be sustainable, and we are on pretty tough land. It is very rich in the plant communities, but the geography is such that we need a pretty substantial ranch crew per head. But that said, let me see if I can get back to the original question here. But frankly, the real economic engine here is the development, and let's not kid ourselves about that. The cash flows that will come from that limited development absolutely dwarf what our other enterprises are going to generate. And in fact, one way to look at the other enterprises is that they add value to the development, which is not the way I like to look at it, because I like to think of this as all one portfolio involving that leads to conservation. But we have an organization in the Madison Valley called the Madison Valley Ranchlands Group, and one of the members of the Ranchlands Group, a traditional rancher who has absolutely no pretensions to be a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, was facing the dilemma between dividing his land into 20-acre parcels and developing it and selling it off, and after talking to our operation is now developing 2 parcels, putting the rest under conservation easement, and by making those 2 parcels exceptionally scarce has driven the value up high enough that he can afford not only to continue what he's doing, but to improve his lifestyle considerably, and to sort of take a couple steps back from the edge in a way that we hope will be sustainable, and he won't have to continue to do that. In fact, he won't be able to, because he's put an easement on the rest of his land. So I think the Institute's goal really is to make this complicated experiment a little more replicable, and to make it a little bit easier for folks to put up wildlife-friendly fencing, to negotiate the process of an easement, to negotiate all of the processes involved in development, and to make it actually possible for folks to do what we've been doing with a little bit more of a cash padding than a lot of folks are going to have.
I think that's interesting. We talk a lot about mixed use when talking about urban development, but I think it's time that we start talking about rural development also as mixed use. And what you guys are doing is really fascinating. And you know what, Brett, you've done all kinds of different things in diversifying, doing specialty. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the mixed use that you've done on your land?
I guess before I'd step into that, one thing I'd ask Joshua, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you have to do more than make it break even.
Right.
The reason why you guys acquired the land in the first place is because it was only break even. It needs to be profitable. And as far as the properties, the parcels you were talking about, and I understand, I appreciate everything that's going on there, and I understand there has to be a happy medium, but one way to look at that also is it's just a bridge loan. Does that help that rancher be any more profitable, find any more profitability, or is it just a bridge loan, a Band-Aid to heal the problem for a little while and he's going to be there again? So I just wanted to make that statement, I guess. But as far as the things that we've tried to do, thankfully, my father and my brother and brother-in-law, when they were really growing the operation in the late 80s and early 90s, and then when I came home, we've never been afraid of technology, never been afraid of trying the new thing. We've used DNA on our cattle herd, being a purebred operation that's allowed us to do some economies of scale. Also in the farming operation, we've embraced GPS and just global technology for like auto steering, and I'm looking forward to the future as far as the possibility of, robotics and that kind of thing. All these things, they have to come to the point where they're cost feasible, and and some of them have been. Robotics, of course, is not, but it's something you have to look forward to the future to help make us be more profitable so that we can stay on the land. Another thing that you brought up, Courtney, that we've discussed in the past that we're exploring, we're in the initial stages of it, is wind generation. We have some property that has good potential for wind generation, and that's something we're moving towards
I've
as
always
well.
thought that if we could harness that wind over there, rather than making us crazy, if we could actually make money off of it, it would be a great thing. You know, I think I've got room for sort of one more question from me that I'd like either Hank or Wendy to address, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. The question is, I love the idea of mixed use, and I love all this innovation that's going on with conservation, with different farming practices, with trying different crops, all of this innovation that's going on. How do you, being that, and I'm perhaps stereotyping here, but from lots and lots of years of living with and working with lots of farmers, they're a pretty pragmatic, independent lot, and they're out there for a reason. How do we make some of the ideas that are going on in our urban centers or in some of these experimental things, or just with smart farmers and ranchers, or in the conservation sector, how do we start getting that information out to landowners and having them implement it? That's a huge gap right there. And so where do we have to go to do that?
I thought robotics used to be called a hired man. At least that's what I did when I was at. Wendy, I'll shut up here in a minute and defer to you on it. I don't think you can come in from outside and say, we're going to educate you. I mean, number one, that's where you'd get hosed in a heartbeat. But if you and I'm sure Rhett knows, there's always folks, and he's obviously one of these, that is willing to try new, and we have a number of those in the valley there. And, ranchers and farmers are always looking over the fence, right? And, if it works over there, I don't care how tough and pragmatic, et cetera, but if it looks like it's working over there, oftentimes that information exchange takes care of itself, I think.
And I guess the only thing I'd add to that, most of our work is in Missoula County, so that's a limited geographic perspective. But one thing that Missoula County is working on through rural initiatives, and I know Pat's out there, is a clearinghouse for landowners, because Five Valleys had a contract with Missoula County to go out and find out what do rural landowners want from the county? What are the tools that aren't there? And one thing they said is, we are getting so much information from everybody. The conservationists are telling us to do this. The farm folks are telling us to do this. What are we supposed to do? And so I think putting together a place, which they're working on here in Missoula County, where people can go and get, whether it's online, which may work, may not.
I'm a fan of online.
Or in person, which I'm a fan of. I think they need to have that central place where they can get information. They need to know all the land trusts and what are all their choices, rather than have each one of us come knocking on their door. So I think that would help a lot.
And I think that's where the challenge has been successful, is we've acted as that clearinghouse, not as an advocacy group for one thing or the other, or one move for or against anything, but where people could come to hopefully find out, the right story.
Good.
One of the things I'd like to add real quick, and I know everybody up here understands, and I'm sure most people do, but something that's very important to understand is, farmers and ranchers are not by nature abusers. They want to preserve the land. They want to keep it viable for the next generation, just like everybody here and everybody in this room, I'm sure, is too. But key is it has to be profitable for them, so that they can make enough to send their kids to college and educate them, so they can keep food on the table and then be able to pass it on to the next generation. But they're not looking to try to abuse the land. That's
Right.
not the case.
Questions from the audience? I think we've got time for a couple. We've got one there in the back. This room looks a lot smaller than it is. It's actually really hard. I know, as you've seen me, it's hard to walk all the way across that thing. Oh, there's one right there.
Jeremy Keene with WGM Group. I'm wondering if the interest in biofuels has had any effect on the pressure to subdivide that land and the increase in crop prices, or the potential increase for crop prices.
That's interesting. Maybe anybody there? Anybody here can address that?
I don't. The only biofuel.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt that biofuels and this potential for wind that I'm talking about have helped profitability. We have seen in the last 12 months grain prices rise. In the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen cattle prices rise. So, typically, ranchers and farmers, it's about 2 years out of 10 that are actually very profitable. But those 2 years out of 10 have to make up for 5 years of break even and 2 to 3 roughly of losing quite a bit of money. So although things are quite a bit better today because of these things, also remember that they are price takers, not price makers. Meaning we go to the fertilizer plant and we say, what will you charge me for fertilizer? Go to the chemical dealer, what will you charge me for chemical? And then you go to the grain purchaser and you say, what will you give me for my grain, or what will you give me for my cattle? So it doesn't take long for those other input costs to catch right up with that newfound profitability you just found for a short time.
And I think anecdotally, just as a side note, across the nation, how this affects conservation in particular is the CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program. It's one of the largest conservation programs in the country, and we're going to see a lot less in CRP in the next coming years. They've already projected, I can't remember what the percentage is, because people are taking their land out of CRP to put it into grain because the grain prices are so high, and corn is just through the roof. So that's another thing. Question there in the back.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Reinhardt, and I'm a planner and a representative from Missoula. And I asked this question as an individual. If any of the panelists see potential for using transfer development rights as a way to keep folks on the farm, and in a sense to pay folks for not developing and then transferring those development rights to areas where it might be more appropriate and suited to development. It's a tool that's been used in other places, and they're doing it in Gallatin County. And I just wonder if there are folks on the panel or in the room who have interest in exploring that as a tool.
Wendy? Everybody's pointing at you.
Well, that was going back to this contract with the county that we had. That was way up there on the list of things people wanted some help on, both transfer of development rights and purchase of development rights. Of course, the big problem there, or the challenge there, is where are you going to transfer them to? And a lot of our land is unzoned, and the transfer of development right obviously implies, there's where they're coming from and then where they're going. And I think it's something that we need to explore. Landowners want that opportunity, but you've got in between us and that point the challenge of getting into the regulatory world, planning and zoning, which interestingly enough in that contract that we did, we were very surprised to hear that rural residents are way more amenable to having that conversation than they ever were before, which I think is encouraging. Does that answer your question, Michelle? There you go.
There you go.
I think it's just another tool in that toolbox you're talking about.
Another question right there.
Hi, Courtney. I'm Linda McCarthy with the Missoula Downtown Association. My family is from DePuyter, Montana. And some of the things that we've seen in that central part of Montana is acquisition of small family farms by Hutterite colonies. I think there's sort of a good thing, bad thing that goes with that. I'm interested in particularly your perspective, Brett, on how that plays out in farming and ranching for the community and in community development.
Are there any Hutterites in here?
That's a loaded question.
That is a very loaded question.
That's definitely an issue we all contend with. The things that the Hutterites have is diversification. You know, they're well-rounded from cattle to grain to sheep to geese, etc. And it's definitely an issue that we contend with every day. I'm going to try to keep my real thoughts to myself here, but
You know, I might be able to add to that. Linda, you're right. They have huge buying power. You know, really, besides the state, if you're a small farmer looking to expand on any land near yours, and you have a Hutterite colony close by, you will get outbid every single time, and that's just because they have huge buying power, and it is an interesting issue, and I think it's one that has yet to come to a head in central Montana. But I think that the Hutterite colonies continue to grow. They just built a new one near Augusta, which bought up a bunch of the ranch land there, right there on the front. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out on communities here in the near future. Question? Right there?
My name is Bobby Norton. I'm from Kyla, a rancher. And I think the issue that has been brought up is federal income tax situations.
Federal income tax.
Yes, outside money coming into Montana, buying large tracts of land, are probably tax havens. Whereas a gentleman like Brad Whitman on a ranch in Montana, his own family, he's got to make a profit. He can't give away land. Whereas a guy that's coming in from Ted Turner or something like that, or somebody coming into Silicon Valley, they're using that as a write-off against the big income in California. And that's a big thing that's going on in Montana now. Outside interests coming in and buying land, they can hold it for 10 years and use it as a write-off against income somewhere else. I think that ought to be discussed.
That's a good point. I don't think we have time for that, actually. That's a large discussion. We can talk about that at the break, but I think it's time to wrap up here. Thanks to the panel. We have a very diverse group of people with lots of smart people. So thanks for being here, and thanks for listening. Now we're going to get going on another showcase on new communities in Montana. And we're going to hear from a couple good projects, a couple interesting projects. And the first one is the new community in Three Forks, Montana. And that will be Nick Kaufman from WGM Group, who I believe is around somewhere. He's making his way up here.
Thank you very much for inviting us to the conference and to talk about Rolling Glen Ranch. And I want to thank Courtney especially for her fine description of camouflage and airplanes. I had a visual sort of image of camouflage. Now I have an olfactory that goes along with the visual. So thank you for that. I also noticed, and I think you noticed, as you look up on the big screens, people look a little shiny. And what I found as I came up, the heat that was generated up here yesterday during the Ravalli County debate is still here. You would have thought with a planner, a lawyer, and a developer there'd be enough wind to blow that out, but they didn't, so I'm going to take my coat off. We talked a little earlier about Ravalli County, and Mr. Kraus, who's the mayor of Bozeman, was up here, and Bozeman has an influence on the project that we're going to talk about. And he stated that he got his gray hair when he got married, but I got mine when I started working in Ravalli County. So this is a picture and image that we all think of about Montana, especially when we leave the place and we're gone for a day or two or gone for a week. We sort of close our eyes and think about what Montana is. And the image of Broadwater County from the 1800s to 1980 sort of epitomizes what we think about in Montana. But there's change, and Jerry Sorensen talked about that. There's change on the wind in eastern Montana, and Broadwater County is changing also. In the 1990s, Broadwater County was the third fastest growing county in the state of Montana, only behind Ravalli and Gallatin counties. And from 1990 to 2000, there was a 32% increase in population. And if you look at the map of Broadwater County, you can see Canyon Ferry Reservoir here, and then, of course, Townsend is in that area. And what we're talking about is southern Broadwater County, where Interstate 90 is here, and there's really no established community in the southern part of Broadwater County. This is a slide that Brent used earlier, and I'll use the same slide. And this comes from the U.S. Census Bureau. And what it tells us is that Broadwater County, at the year 2030, is expected to have a 51% increase in population. Now, if you listen to Chris Thornburg yesterday morning, in his story and his talk about market, population doesn't really respond to market. The population is going to grow regardless of what happens to the marketplace. And so these projections for our counties in Montana are something we should take fairly serious. So let's look at southern Broadwater County and the development pattern that's happened there over the last 10 years. And this shows you about a 3 square mile area and land extensive tracts from 1 acre to 10 to 20 acres that have occurred on the north side of Interstate 90. Now, I'm an economist and also a land use planner, and I don't do economic forecasting, and I'll tell you why. In 1970, when I was driving from Eastern Montana College to Missoula on this piece of Interstate 90 in a 1962 Econoline van, I broke down on this stretch of highway. And one of the things that I kind of was thinking about while I was waiting for the tow truck to come and pick me up was that this land is so desolate that this will never be developed. And I was wrong. If you look at this today, it has been developed, and it's been extensively developed, and in a pattern that isn't the best pattern for our land. Chris Thornburg coined some words, and I pick up the paper every day to see if I can use the term last best place. I'm not sure if I can, so I'll coin a word which is last better place. And I use last better place because we can do things better than what you saw, on that last slide. These are 9 subdivisions. Those 9 subdivisions total about 1,325 lots that you see in that development series of, series of developments right there. 1,325 lots over about 3 square miles. And that doesn't count the hundreds of acreage tracts that are being proposed in southern Broadwater County, that haven't been approved yet. So how does Broadwater County accommodate growth? It accommodates growth like other places in eastern and western Montana. One of the things it does is limited urban development around their communities like Townsend and Three Forks. Another thing it does is 1 to 5 acre tracts. Right? Another thing that Broadwater County does is dispersed development that's happening around points like Canyon Ferry and north of Interstate 90 at that Wheat-Montana intersection. But those type of developments aren't being planned to allow for the social infrastructure associated with community development, right? That's the missing piece. If we look at the town of Three Forks and we look at smart growth and what smart growth means, we would be expanding around the town of Three Forks, which is a few miles away from the land that I just pointed out to you, except for a couple of things. One of those things is that Three Forks, hit your buttons right here. Three Forks is called Three Forks because there's a lot of floodplain around the community of Three Forks. The other question you have to answer is how big should our towns and communities get? So if you just imagine the town or community you live in right now, close your eyes for a minute, just imagine the place where you live. Can you even envision or imagine that place being twice as big or 3 times as big as it is today? So certainly one option or one tool we have is to make the places where towns and villages are bigger, but maybe there's another option for us out there also. And so this is a GIS representation of Three Forks and its constraints for development. That blue area is basically area that's constrained for floodplain or other reasons. You can see some constraints to the southern part of Three Forks, but then I want you to look over here. Whoops. I'll take a class in avionics here, or audio-visual. This is the development area that I'm going to be talking about in today's presentation, but look at it happens on this side of Interstate 90, and it happens on this side of Interstate 90, and it's happening over here also. This is that development that's happening in southern Broadwater County, not around the town of Three Forks. So what about workforce in Broadwater County? What's happening in terms of the population growth and the ability of that community to provide workforce housing? The median price of a home is about $185,000. It takes about $50,000 to afford a median-priced home. Unfortunately, the median income in Broadwater County is about $32,689, and so a lot of people in that county have problems affording housing. It's not just Missoula and Billings and Bozeman, it's our rural communities and rural counties too, just like Broadwater County. So we can develop better land use patterns, and so as we look at that development in southern Broadwater County, we can look at a planned community. We have to make sure the topography is acceptable, that we can get sewer and water, that we can employ good community design, meet with agencies to offset the impacts to those folks, and then of course go through a subdivision review process. So right in the middle there you see sort of a yellow color, and that yellow color is a 1.5 mile undeveloped piece of property in the heart of those 1,325 lots, large acreage tracts, and the continuing type of sprawl pattern development that's occurring. And so what these developers, Steve and Susie Kavanaugh, decided to do was to actually look at the idea of a planned community to provide the social infrastructure services and other things that are associated with actually a community as it develops instead of sprawl and 30 or 40 mile trips to Bozeman, Montana, or to Helena, or back over to Butte. And so the concept of Rolling Glen became a reality. There are some natural features on the property. There's a large knob in this area. There's a drainage area that comes through here like this. It has natural open space components, parks, golf course, 2-block downtown, traditional neighborhood design, more suburban style design with large parks within a 1/4 mile walking distance to the residents. It provides for social infrastructure, water and sewer systems, paved streets, sidewalks, and for the economic provision of services, including offset and providing mitigation for existing services that will provide service to the project. And it places the tax base and economic development in Broadwater County. So if you go back and look at that slide of those 1,300 lots, those are all in Broadwater County. Broadwater County pays for police, fire, school bus services. The tax base and the commercial uses are over in Gallatin County and Three Forks. So Broadwater County doesn't even get the benefit of the tax base where their people are going for their services. So the land use in Rolling Glen Ranch, these are photographic illustrations. I talked to you about the 2-block downtown area, anchored on one end by a civic block and on one end by a human services block. Storefront commercial with residential upstairs, traditional neighborhood design, alley concept surrounding that, school site, preservation of open space, the golf course development with Founders Club, and sort of a blow up of the more suburban style development with the parks and road system. There's about 651 acres of open space, about 37% of the planned community is in open space. And I think what's most important is it's a viable alternative to the sprawl that we see there. You could close your eyes and think of that square 1.5 miles being developed in 2-acre tracts or even in 20-acre tracts. And I think we can do better than that. I think we can think of other alternatives. So the planned community has a social structure, a place where neighbors can meet, a place where they can gather, a place with diversity and convenience, and hopefully affordability. It was interesting to look at the slides from Billings and actually watch what's happening in Missoula, because the downtowns are turning into gentrified areas with lots of services, but services for higher income folks, not services for a broad spectrum of the economy and diversity of the people that may want to live in those downtown areas. Civic buildings, human services, traditional neighborhood designs, town center, parks, recreation, golf. We talked about the elements that we investigated a bit earlier. The transportation system internal to the project is critical. Neighborhood collectors, loop streets, primary arterials that lead out of the development. The external street system, Interstate 90, Highway 287 that takes us up to Townsend, Price Road and Wheatland Road all figure into the design. And we're looking at a public water supply system for this, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the impacts of water usage on acreage tracts versus the impact of water usage for planned community development. So the average daily flow at full development for Rolling Glen Ranch, 2,500, the equivalent of 2,500 residential units, is about 1,045 gallons per minute. If you were to take that 1,800 acres and cover it with 2-acre tracts, the water rights for 34 gallons a minute for each of those wells would be 27,200, right? 27 times less for the planned community than the large acreage tract. This is a graphic that came from a presentation at the League of Cities and Towns. It graphically shows the water consumption for those large acreage tracts. And so if we were to take a 1/4-acre tract here and look at the water development represented by this blue column compared to the water usage for this 3-acre home, there's about 12 times the water usage here than there is in this 1/4-acre tract. The sewer system for Rolling Glen Ranch is a state-of-the-art sewer system. The goal here was to reuse the treated wastewater on site. We're in a closed basin system for this piece of property, and the reuse of water is an important part of the sustainability for this particular project. This gives you the water cycle. I'm not sure I need to go into how the sinks and the toilets work, but it takes you through the wastewater treatment plant, the disinfection, the discharge to surface water, which is the typical way towns and communities do it, and then in some places actually drinking water filtration and recirculation back. In this case, we break the cycle right here. We do a water treatment system that provides Class A effluent, and we can use it for irrigation on the golf course and lawns and open space in and around the planned community. This is a brief description of the wastewater treatment system. What you need to know is that gray and black water goes in, and water clean enough to irrigate in and around homes comes out the other side. It's a membrane filter system, and this is an illustration of how that membrane works. It's very small, some size between a piece of spaghetti and a human hair. It actually filters out bacteriological and virus contaminants in the water system. Our disposal alternatives that we're going to use on this planned community are for ornamental ponds and for irrigation. And so while we have the option to dispose of it in leach fields, we'd like to reuse, store on site, and reuse every drop of that water that we can on site. Broadwater County, in the face of continued growth in that area, adopted a growth policy in 2003. They paid particular attention to growth at the south end of Broadwater County. We believe this is a viable alternative to sprawl. It provides cost-efficient services to the southern portion of Broadwater County and provides a tax base to that part of the community. It provides a diversity of housing types and costs, and provides for economic development at that end of the county. There's provisions for financing and mitigating impact for services. There's the provision for preservation of agricultural lands. And most importantly, it's in the heart of existing development in the southern portion of Broadwater County. So we talked earlier, and I think the mayor of Bozeman mentioned that there's development sprawling out beyond Bozeman. And he talked about some different communities. Amsterdam is one that's close to Bozeman. I think it's going to double or triple in size here shortly. And certainly the economic factors associated with development and land costs and land use regulation in the region has fueled the land use pattern that we saw in the first slide for this development, those large acreage tracts. So as land use planners in the public sector and land use planners in the private sector, the market forces are at work to take that 1,800 acres and turn it into 20-acre tracts right now. So working together, what's our responsibility? Do we have a responsibility to look at alternatives for that development and provide opportunities and options? And I think we do. And I think what Rolling Glen Ranch provides is an opportunity and an option for a different pattern of land use, other than the land extensive tracts. And I think it's something that should figure into what I'll call smarter growth, which is not just development next to existing towns and expanding Belgrade to become part of Bozeman, Montana, or Stevensville to become part of Hamilton, Montana. But actually look at the concept of where settlement patterns are happening, why they're happening, and then try to provide the social infrastructure and the opportunity for actually new town development. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. Next, we've got Ken Madden from Shiloh Land and Development, and he's going to be talking about the Flatiron Ranch, which is near Hamilton. So, you bet.
Well, first I have to commend you and thank you very much for hanging in here during the lunch hour. I know your body clocks are telling you that it's time to eat. I hope that I can give you something to chew on, if possible. Jonathan, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to come and be a part of this, but also thank you for the visionary leadership. I'll get this microphone working right, it's okay. The visionary leadership of this conference is that I think right now there is a great dearth or need for leadership in western Montana. Actually, it's a crisis. This project that I'm going to share with you now is called Flatiron Ranch. It's actually the 5th project that we have going in Montana, or have done in Montana, and I'll get this working. It is in Hamilton, it's in Ravalli County. As yesterday, you're all able to experience as just a brief moment of the political climate in Ravalli County. I saw Perry a little bit later, and I really thought it should have been more of the Jerry Springer mindset of nobody ripped their shirt off and accused someone of stealing their trailer house and their dog. But that is many times just a situation that we're faced. But this is the 5th project that we have going. We've done Creekwood Park in Whitefish. I've done the Riverwood Park project in Whitefish. We have the Glacier Ranch going now in Kalispell, Whitefish. We've done the Arrow Hill Ranch project in Hamilton, and now we're on to the Flatiron Ranch project. The Shiloh Land and Development Company also does commercial projects. We've done what I'm trying to get out of the word is industrial warehouse projects. We have 2 of those going right now. I'm a 30-year veteran of the home building development industry. I'm a dinosaur, but I'm a young dinosaur. And yesterday I sat there in absolute stunned silence as I listened to one of our elected public officials make, and I considered personally in a derogatory format, I'm a survivor, so you guys are going to have to suffer through this with me for just a moment, and accused us of being speculators. I'm not a speculator. I'm a man like you and I that takes the risk, that's an innovator, that brings the future into the present. Is that it's commendable in this conference that we're in right now that we're looking, and all those that are assembled here now, for some sort of visionary leadership. A man once said to me, a wise man said that if a man without a vision for his future will always return to his past. In Ravalli County right now, it is progressing to be one of the oldest populations in the state, and is scheduled and anticipated to be one of the oldest populations in the nation. And in that elderly population, there's 2 things that I've noticed that old people do, and my children accuse me of being old, and the older I get, the better I get at what I used to do in my own mind. But the one thing I've seen that old people do is that they continually look and talk about the past. And the second thing they do is they die, and they take the future generations with them. And it's time in this conference, and for my moment just to be allowed to share that, is that for us to look forward to the future. Yesterday, the economic outlook was very glum, could be discouraging. But as a veteran, I want to encourage you, is that stay the course. Center for Economic Development nationwide ranked all 50 states. Out of Arizona, a booming economy, they gave it an F. I wonder if anyone in this room could possibly even anticipate or guess what they gave the state of Montana. They gave it an A. We're on a good course. We need to stay that course, and we need to look to the future and bring it into the present for future generations. The Flatiron Ranch project is a 494-acre project located in Hamilton. It's an open, non-gated community. It's a lifestyle community. It's amenity development, meaning that there is a reason to be there community. It's not just another Stubblefield community. It's where I have taken all my years of experience and brought the best that I know to bring to the fore and bring a community that melds and meets in with the existing culture and climate, the community that's there. And by climate, I don't mean just so much as the weather, but I'm talking about what's happening in the city, what's happening in the community. It's our commitment to do it right. You know, we want to take some of the elements of that visionary land planning, all those responsibility that we have of stewardship of the land, and bring it to fore and lay it. We have also the project next to this is almost a 300-acre subdivision called Arrow Hill Ranch, and it is on 5 to 12-acre ranchettes. It sits on hillsides where you look up and you see houses. They should be at a less density. This is a valley floor that has high groundwater, and what our intention was is to try to optimize its location in proximity to an existing city amenities and take those existing culture and community and bring them in and meld ourselves together. You know, the goal is not just to talk about good visionary planning, but actually implement it and take those beliefs and put them into action. This is this project out of 494 acres has 125 acres of open space, or 25% of it. It has a web park system that goes through it, and there's a debate in land development now whether there should be a spine park or whether there should be a web park. We have intentionally done it as a web park. It's my belief that web parks give access to everybody that's allowed to use the development. It is centered and focused around a community center, which is the reason to be there. The community center sits on a 6-acre lake system. It's the building right here, this number 1 or A building is the community center. And in that community center is a mail room, workout facilities, meeting rooms, child care, and a pool. You do not receive your mail at your house. You receive your mail at the community center. It's intended to cause people to interact with one another. In this web park system is that, in the original slide, is that in this web park system, you can see there's 10.5 miles of hike and bike trails that are active that allow people to go from a location on this side to the community center and join and meet up with others. The intention of the mailroom is that when you go and you get your mail and you can talk to someone about their life. You can actually see someone that maybe has a daughter that's babysitting or kittens for sale or a garage sale, but that interaction of community. Next to the community center is this 6-acre fishing lake, but next to that is what we call our fishing guide lodge or building. It's a small access building that allows for meetings and other things such as that. This thing's set up on an automatic rotation, and I will unrotate it momentarily if you'll allow me to do that and keep it moving through it. But in addition to the community center, which sits right there, as I said, had the workout facilities, meeting rooms, child care, the pool. There is no commercial element in the subdivision because we're close to the city core, and what we're wanting to do is to be able to not take away from that downtown commercial and the retail that's there. Sitting next to the community center right here is a lodge, a restaurant lodge type building. It has a portico that you drive under, has that large lodge effect, and it overlooks the lake. You look right across these lakes and look up at Blodgett Canyon. And so it's just incredible views, but that you can sit out there and have dinner and watch people fish or just enjoy the view. And it's a 24-top restaurant, not very large. Sitting right next to that is a boutique hotel that allows and houses 24 suites or individual units, housing units, not so much as a hotel, but something that's a little bit nicer than that. All around this community center and this pond and this main amenity are 24 cabins, or excuse me, not cabins, they're or fractional ownership or can be single ownership cabins that have the benefit to use all of the amenities that are there. There's on the project, I'll move ahead and then I'll move back. I'll try. On this project, there's about 125 acres of open land, but there's also several parks. There is a football soccer field right here. There is a football baseball field right here. There's a soccer field right here. There's 6 tennis courts on the property. There's a diversity of product on it in our attempt to control and soften the traffic that's on it, we've done a softening flow of curved roads. It has a lot of roundabouts on the project. It has what we believe is a successful method of land planning and softening and traffic control and calming of traffic is cul-de-parks. So they're not just cul-de-sacs, but they're cul-de-parks. I know that's controversial now in the land planning business, is whether cul-de-sacs or cul-de-parks or straight roads that have narrow and that have cars on them. I'm not an advocate of that because I believe it's dangerous to children. But yet we are attempting to do everything we can to keep this in a traffic calming, smooth, soft flow. The project is divided into 14 different phases. Can be built out over what we anticipate be an 8-year to 10-year span. In addition to the football, baseball, soccer, tennis court, we've also done what we call frisbee parks or frisbee and kite parks. I'll try and go back and show you what our vision of that it would be. Streetscape of what we anticipate it looking like, trees, very, very friendly. The subdivisions that we've done up in Whitefish, we required that each of the homes have a front porch. The garage had to sit back from the front porch. Even in the CCNRs required that there had to be a rocking chair or a porch swing on the front porch. The parks are intended to be more of a natural park, not a groomed city park, but of a natural park where there would be kids playing kites, dogs, frisbees, that kind of natural Montana, not groomed. As part of the project, there are 38 one-acre lots. There's 190 half to three-quarter acre lots. There's 128 one-third acre lots. There's 49 cabins, 62 courtyard homes, and 52 what we call paired villas. Also, there's a contingent or a component in there for what we call community or workforce housing. I've heard it called affordable housing. We try to stay away from that moniker and just use the term as community or workforce housing. There are 41 front-loaded single-family and 62 unplexes. So there's a total of 622 units over 14 phases. This just shows you what an unplex house looks like. It is the garages are on the rear alley loaded, and the front of the house gives you the appearances that they're more separated. This is just a plan view of the unplexes as well as some of the courtyard homes. This is a view of what we anticipate the park system to look like. There are 3 gazebos planned on the project. This is our courtyard and clustered homes is that we anticipate on this project that it will not have just a single source of affluent buyers, but on one portion of the project we can have someone that's buying a 1-acre lot that maybe want to build $1 million home and live in it as a retirement home. The other portion on the far western side of the project is more higher density, and that is to accommodate over here on this side is higher density was what we call workforce housing, which you can have unplexes. You could have apartments. We're trying to stay away from that, but unplexes, clustered homes. But you could have a young man right here just starting off in life renting a unit. You could have his mom and dad living over here. They could have the sister in a larger single-family home. They could have the sister in her family as they're younger in a smaller 1/3 to half-acre home. And grandma and grandpa could own one of the courtyard homes and come from their home in San Diego or Washington and visit. And they could all meet at the community center to fish and enjoy or have dinner. Or if Aunt Martha and Uncle Harold came to visit, then they could stay in the hotel. But it's meant to be an overall comprehensive lifestyle community that takes and accentuates what we have as far as existing amenities. From an economic standpoint, this project over a 10-year period has the potential to introduce $280 million into the existing Ravalli economic community, bring 1,000 temporary jobs and 400 permanent jobs. And probably the most significant that we don't really understand is it brings a significant facet to creating a sustainable element to the economy. Ravalli County right now stands at majority of the individual people that live there live at or below the poverty level, and the wages are depressed. It's the fastest growing community from a percentile, but it ranks last in the nation, or excuse me, last in the state for economic wage earning growth, per capita income. It's only risen $4,000 in the last 25 years. We believe that this is a definite benefit, not just from a land planning, stewardship of the land, but also just looking to the future. A wise man once said that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And I believe we have a stewardship responsibility to bring the future into the present and do it with good land planning, good economic planning, and cooperative work with the existing governmental agencies. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Next up, we have Jim Gill from the Bitterroot Resort, who's going to talk about the Bitterroot Resort.
Hello, I'm Jim Gill. You've seen a lot of very good PowerPoints today, but we didn't bring ours. Instead, we decided that we'd like to talk about the tremendous challenges and opportunities that we have at the Bitterroot Resort. We are a 2,989-acre private ranch, and we're just 12 miles south of Missoula, Montana, off of Highway 93. Virtually every major issue facing the communities of the West are represented in Bitterroot. We have surrounding sprawl, zoning, water usage, public recreation on public lands, traffic, housing, and natural resource management. They're all complicated issues and in many ways polarizing issues. In western Montana, we see large ranches that are in many ways going the way of the dinosaur. They're big, beautiful, and extinct. And the easiest thing would have been for Tom McClay to sell a portion of his ranch and let someone else deal with the issues, mainly the development issues. But as a fifth-generation Montanan and a landowner, that wasn't an option Tom wanted to take. Instead, he's chosen another path. He's chosen to meet these land issues one-on-one and find solutions that fit both western Montana and the needs of a successful Bitterroot Resort. We've assembled an experienced team to provide their expertise as we work through the initial planning and approval stages. Resort and ski hill designers, land use planners, architects, hydrologists, golf course designers, attorneys, engineers, wastewater experts, communication firms, accountants, scientists, and wildlife specialists. We wanted to make sure we got all these areas addressed correctly. We have the physical attributes that will allow Bitterroot Resort to be one of the best recreational sites in all the world. It's an incredible mountain, ample real estate, and lots of available snowmaking water. The addition of public lands on our ski hill will give us a vertical drop of some 5,555 vertical feet, making it the longest in the U.S. The north-facing slopes of Carlton, on Carlton Ridge, give us some 3,000 vertical feet of intermediate and high intermediate terrain, which is all groomable. The elevation of Lolo Peak will allow us to ski north-facing snow through April, while on the same day allowing you to play golf on the valley floor. As many of you are aware, the lack of snowmaking water is a common choking point in winter resort development. Without adequate snowmaking, the consumer does not consider you a reliable ski resort destination. Bitterroot Resort currently holds enough agricultural water rights and water sources to provide the type of snowmaking that's needed to be a success in today's marketplace. Now, Bitterroot Resort is not the first to recognize the great skiing potential of Lolo Peak and Carlton Ridge. As early as 1960, the U.S. Forest Service identified this particular terrain as the prime winter sports recreation site. And in 1988, in a general election, 62% of Missoula County residents voted to support the idea of a ski area on this location. At that time, the plan was to approach the ridge, Carlton Ridge, from the north, just off Highway 12, west of Lolo. Back in 1988, the Forest Service and the community groups actively sought out a developer to pursue the development of this project. And it quickly became obvious that the lack of real estate at the base and no water for snowmaking from this northern approach made it an unattractive proposition for any developer. The current concept of creating Bitterroot Resort on the east shoulder of Carlton Ridge brings the real estate and snowmaking water of the McClay Ranch back to the party, making the entire project economically viable. But economics alone aren't the whole story. Bitterroot Resort is designed to achieve a number of specific goals. They're environmental and financial, as well as social. The social, environmental, and financial goals are a triple bottom line approach that recognizes a commitment to the community and to the environment surrounding the resort. We're not just building a ski complex or a new subdivision. It's an entire community with shopping, restaurants, and entertainment venues, open space, sports complexes, residences, convention centers, as well as hotels. We're incorporating environmentally sound land use planning principles. Structures will be densely clustered around the community with a great deal of open space. We've been working with our land plan for some 4 years now, and it still isn't finalized. We want to be able to be flexible enough to incorporate any new information as it becomes available, and we're fortunate because we're starting from scratch. We're able to incorporate many successful ideas that have come from other resorts and other land planners that have gone before us. Things such as pedestrian villages with underground parking, energy-efficient buildings, a state-of-the-art water treatment system, water recycling, the use of native plant materials, subdued nighttime lighting that allows you to see the light of the night sky, and the use of sustainable building materials. When you get to start with a blank slate like we are, it's exciting to be able to consider how we might incorporate all the new technology into our resort from the very outset. It's important to keep in mind that the Bitterroot Resort will take time to complete. The first phase will be completed in over 10 years. There will be proceeds from real estate, and real estate is an essential profit center that provides the level of amenities that guests today have come to expect. It provides revenue that keeps the resort's products fresh. The real estate component fulfills the economic side of our triple bottom line and allows us to fund the environmental and social goals of the Bitterroot Resort. Developing this real estate will contribute to a larger tax base for local school districts. And while budgets are important to these districts, we also plan to have a more direct impact on the students themselves. The ski resort plans to continue to support new skiers, and of course that's critical to our development. We plan to build a facility that will provide the best possible learning experience. Any student with a 3.0 or higher grade point average will qualify for a half-price student pass, and of course fifth graders will ski absolutely free. We recognize the fact that a development the size of Bitterroot Resort will impact both Ravalli and Missoula counties. Voluntary impact fees will cover emergency services and the necessary infrastructure for county services. But we plan to contribute additional monies to our local communities as well. We pledge to set aside 1% from each real estate transaction that will be distributed back to the local economy, to the local community organizations through a philanthropic arm of the resort called the Bitterroot Foundation. Now, Missoula carries its own economy, and there's no doubt that the Bitterroot Resort will deliver a significant positive impact on Missoula and western Montana as a whole. As a year-round destination resort and residential community, we have more to offer than seasonal jobs. There'll be a significant number of career opportunities in recreation, hospitality, management, marketing, and retail. In just 10 years from now, we will be completing phase one of our construction. We estimate some $40 million in annual salaries will be paid to resort employees. That's $40 million a year for the resort. In 2006, across the state of Montana, tourism generated more than $229 million in tax revenue. The tax revenue did not come from Montanans, but from tourists coming from all over the world. New money to the state coffers and our economy. Now, we know that a destination resort with our amenities will add significantly to that total. Our physical location is ideal. With 30 minutes from the international airport served by 4 major airlines, you'll arrive at Bitterroot Resort via an existing 4-lane highway. We're also fortunate enough to have an existing rail line outside our front door that has the potential for hosting passenger service in the future. And what does the guest want? They want our mountains and the recreational experience, and that's exactly what Bitterroot Resort has to offer. Nordic, downhill skiing, snowboarding, golfing, mountain biking, hiking, wildlife viewing, equestrian services, photography. Many of these activities, due to our 3,500-foot base elevation, extend into the all-important shoulder seasons, and continue throughout the summer months, giving Bitterroot Resort true year-round appeal. Of course, we're not the only ones focused on providing recreation. It's also part of the mission of our neighbor to the west, the United States Forest Service. A stated goal of the U.S. Forest Service is, as set forth in law, the mission is to achieve quality land management under the sustainable multiple-use management concept to meet the diverse needs of people. On a more local level, the Lolo and Bitterroot National Forests' own plan for public lands specifically includes providing recreation as one of their stated goals. Partnering with Bitterroot Resort allows the Forest Service an excellent opportunity to achieve this mandate. Long list of physical attributes, the encouraging financial outlook, and positive social goals of the resort doesn't mean we don't have our share of challenges. In addition to our own internal planning process, we're also working with an impressive number of governmental agencies and offices. We're committed to completing the process and meeting the requirements as outlined by the Department of Environmental Quality, Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, Montana Department of Transportation, Missoula County Rural Initiatives, Bitterroot National Forest, Lolo National Forest, Missoula County Public Works, Missoula County Office of Planning and Grants, Missoula and Ravalli County Emergency Services, our own Montana state government and U.S. Congress, local school districts, of course the City of Missoula and the Missoula and Ravalli County Commissioners. We've repeatedly invited local environmental and civic groups to join us for an open discussion of their concerns and ideas. And of course, some have taken us up on it and some of them haven't. We make ourselves available for presentations to interested groups around Montana and the Bitterroot Valley. And we conduct tours of the property to people who'd like to see the property firsthand. Since 2006, we've opened up the existing ski terrain for free snowcat skiing to people who want to experience it for themselves. And Bitterroot Resort will provide quality recreation in one of the most beautiful places on earth. We'll provide stable jobs and attract tourist dollars year-round. Our village is designed to be a model community that will enrich the surrounding area and preserve open space. But it's not one analysis, one group, or one opinion that will give you an insight into the issues surrounding development in the Rockies. Bitterroot Resort is in the direct center of this discussion. And today I'm encouraged that this diverse group has assembled to participate in a discussion to take the time to share information with each other. The direction of growth in Montana and the Northern Rockies will be determined by the leadership shown by individuals in this room. We must all face these challenges with courage and be willing to take the lead when it's our turn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.